Happy Sunday, everyone. They say that people who get leadership training are much better at being resilient and not having to deal with the burnout that a lot of other people deal with. So, what is it about leadership? What is it about burnout? What can we learn from an expert today who is a life coach, a psychologist, Ph.D.? She is going to tell us what it is about leadership and how we can start taking control over what we can in our lives so that we're not burning out and we can prevent it. My name is Dr. Elsie Coe, and I am the CEO and founder of Lead Physician Leadership Program for Physicians. And I'm also the Chief Medical Officer of American Endovascular and Amputation Prevention. If you want to listen to a lot more of these brilliant interviews, these people who have volunteered their time to talk about topics related to physician leadership, please go to my YouTube page and listen to the whole compilation of various topics. Thank you so much for sharing and liking this. Without further ado, let me introduce to you my guest speaker. Hi, Sharon. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Elsie?
Good. This is very timely, and I'm so glad that you're here. Sharon, before we go any further, I just want to share some of the books that you've written. You're an author, speaker, and a coach on burnout. She's written this book called 7E Solution to Burnout, and go there on Amazon to read it. And she also wrote about how to train your brain for success in 5 steps. Sharon, tell us right away, what is leadership and burnout? How are they related? And let's get started there.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I don't think anyone's actually asked me about how they're related.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, well, so I'll start with my area of expertise, which is burnout. And oftentimes I like to start with that and really define it so people have a very clear understanding and we're all on the same page. So burnout is really chronic stress, if you really want to simplify it down. And when we think about what is stress, stress is when we perceive our circumstances or the challenges in front of us to really exceed our ability to cope or our resources that we have. So, when you think about physicians, clearly a lot of them have been feeling burned out, and chances are they've either actually not had resources that were sufficient to deal, or sometimes we get to a point where we just perceive the situation to be really stressful. Like we can't do it anymore. And I think the more you go down the rabbit hole of burnout, the more it feels like you can't handle things. So it feels more and more stressful as you continue down that line. And then leadership, of course, is where you are able to take control of the situation. You can lead by example. I think what's really important is your relationship and your ability to have empathy and understanding of other people, but also to hold some sort of structure. So even as, we think of leadership as like someone who's leading a team, but even as a physician who is with a patient, you are a leader. They are looking to you for guidance. You are the expert in your field. They're coming to you to help solve a problem. That is leadership in my definition.
Yeah.
Right.
You also mentioned to me before that Seth Godin spoke about that it's important to know that leadership is at the intersection, right, of control and responsibility. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So essentially, he created this really cool grid where you look at what happens when you intersect control and responsibility. And when you are high on control and high on responsibility, that's where leadership actually lives. Now, as physician leaders, it's important for us to be able to take responsibility for the things that we do, right? And then if you have control over them, that's, of course, helpful. And then do what you can to really make the most of the situation. So sometimes we get lost in the shuffle because we focus on all the things that we don't have control over, and we get into that real victim mode that keeps us stuck. And what he's saying is that's where you're not really taking control. You might not have control over things. And then what can you still take responsibility for? I always tell my clients, as I'm teaching them a lot of emotional intelligence skills, is that it's really about what you do with what you have, right? So we are in a certain situation, and then how are you managing yourself? That is such a big part of emotional intelligence. So
Yep.
it's a lot of it is that self-awareness of like, what's going through my mind? What am I telling myself? Because our brain is constantly coming up with all kinds of stories, and then being able to say, okay, well, this story doesn't serve me, and it's making me feel irritable, or it's making me lash out, or it's making me shut down, and that's not how I want to be in the world. And so I'm going to take control of the situation. I'm going to change my response to be more aligned with how I want to be.
Right. I mean, it just you can get down to the point where you feel completely exhausted from what you're doing. Let's talk about how, before we get to solutions, how is exhaustion from burnout different from the physical burnout?
So, what I always like to say is if you think about somebody who's just ran a marathon, they get to the point where their body is just so spent that if you then invited them to go out for a nice little stroll or do really anything, they're like, I just have to go lie down. I can't do another thing. That's physical exhaustion. And we feel that when we're sick, right? We just don't have the energy. We can't get out of bed, things like that. More of what we see in burnout is that mental and emotional exhaustion, which is where you have that mental fog, you can't focus, you just aren't showing up in the same way that you normally do because there's like a switch that's been flipped, and it's hard for you to concentrate, to get in control of your mental faculties, right? There's just something that happens where you're just not, you could sit there in the chair and stare at the computer and like nothing is registering. That's what we're talking about. It's just physically you're fine, right? And if I said to you, oh, let's go for a stroll, you'd be like, yeah, that's great. And the other thing that happens is because it's so different from physical exhaustion, if you are burned out in one area, you might be fine somewhere else. So if I said to you, work right now isn't happening, you're not able to focus, you can't crank out the report or whatever it is you need to do. What do you think about doing something else right now? When we shift our mental focus to something else where we don't feel so stressed out, then we're fine. And that's how we know that's the difference, because with the physical exhaustion, it doesn't matter what I suggest. If you're spent, and you can't really find the energy to do anything else.
Okay, great distinction. Thank you for that. So let's talk about some solutions. So I'm mentally spent. I'm exhausted. What are some of the things that I can do as a physician to snap out of it?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a snap out of it kind of situation. Right?
We all want quick fixes, right, Sharon?
Yeah.
But you're
If
telling
I
me right
snap
now
my
that doesn't work.
fingers, you'll be just fine.
Magic, isn't that what you do?
I'm a magician.
Okay,
I always tell my clients
realistically,
if I had my magic wand, right?
yes,
So
yes,
I
you have
think
your point.
I think there's a few things to consider. One is because burnout can be really more of a mental, emotional exhaustion. If we're feeling really stressed out, then we need to figure out how to get de-stressed. And that's going to look different for each and every individual. Now, also, when you're under that mode of stress, you might respond in a fight or flight kind of way, in which case we need to work on calming your system down. Or you might be in a freeze state, in which case we want to activate you and we want to maybe encourage you to exercise or do some movement. Or we might feel like, you need to reach out to other people and get some support and feel more connected, maybe feel even more grounded. So it very much depends on what's happening. What does stress look like for you in this moment? And those are certainly some immediate solutions. And then we want to look at more long-term solutions in terms of your thinking, in terms of your coping. There's all kinds of things that you can work towards, so that if by definition we said stress is about perception, if the stories and your interpretation and the things that you end up focusing on are all the negatives, how can we expand your view? How can we change it to something that serves you better, that creates the kinds of emotions that you want to feel and allow you to engage in your work in the way that you would like to, as opposed to being reactive and feeling frustrated and resentful and all the negative things.
Yeah, obviously every person's a little individual. It's an individual attention to certain things depending on what the person's going through. But when I say snap out of it, I don't mean let's figure this out overnight and then you're free to go tomorrow. What I mean is for me, when I feel super stressed or anxious about something, what grounds me right then and there, it might not work for you, but is to be in the present moment. And we talk about
Mhm.
meditation, we talk about yoga, but if you are skilled in it, it's one thing. If you're not skilled in it, it's not gonna work unless you try unless you learn how to do it. But it just being putting your space in that present moment, and you're not thinking about what happened in the past, and you're not thinking about what you have to do in the future, and you're anxious about it, that frees my mind, and it brings me clarity for that moment.
And I appreciate you sharing that, but I think there's also a distinction between I just feel stressed and I feel burned out,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So
yes, you're
that's a
right.
really great strategy if you're feeling stressed in this moment.
And there's
But what
different levels of burnout, right?
absolutely.
You could be that type of person who could do that, but then you could be at the other spectrum where it doesn't work.
Exactly. So burnout has multiple stages, and depending on how far up that ladder you go, you have less and less real like you're just less in reality. You're so kind of immersed in this way of thinking. Oftentimes what we see, and perhaps some of the people tuning into this can relate, it starts with this compulsion to prove yourself. And so while we all want to be successful and we want to do good things, and if you're in the service industry, we want to be able to help people, it goes from a desire to a compulsion. And the further down you go with this need to prove yourself and to be the best and to be successful, the more you're getting detached from your own needs, and the more you're kind of over giving to your work, to the people around you, the more you start to deteriorate in terms of your health, in terms of your own energy levels. And so there's got to be a longer term program or solution where we're having more insight into what's happening, what is creating this burnout situation, and how to shift out of that requires us not just to manage our stress, but to really look at how do we show up differently? How do we have more priorities that include us in
Mhm.
that
Yep,
list, right? And
yep.
a lot of times I talk to people who are overgivers and they have guilt about that, and they find that that's very selfish. So there's a lot of programming that we need to look at and really dissect and tease apart so that they can get to a place where they feel good and completely okay with prioritizing themselves, right?
Yep,
It's
it's just building new habits when you've been doing certain things in a certain way and that's been harmful to you and building new habits takes time.
and some
And
of those are mental habits as well.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Such great points. Thank you so much for that. So before we go to the third question I have for you, leaders, they say leadership development. I want to make that distinction instead of just saying all leaders are good at resilience. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is if you've gone through leadership development that encompasses emotional intelligence, like you're speaking about, it does give you some tools to work on being better at avoiding burnout. Would you agree or not?
Absolutely. I think emotional intelligence is at the crux of burnout prevention. The more we can understand that we have control over our mind, and the more that we use that as a tool to help ourselves get aligned with the results that we want to produce in this world, the more we can really change our reactions and allow ourselves to be in situations that were previously stressful and that now no longer stress us out.
Right. So that was my third question is how do we prevent burnout? And that's a piece of it. Is there something else you want to add to that, Sharon?
Well, so, my book is called The 70 Solution to Burnout for a reason. It's because I share 7 different strategies, but the first one, and I believe the really most important one and the one that would give you the most bang for your buck, is emotional intelligence. It's when you understand what you're feeling, that this is a result of your thought processes. And the thing that people often omit is that step in between your circumstance and your emotions. They feel like whatever is happening is causing them to feel irritable, angry, anxious, depressed, whatever the case may be. And I think the most important and the most empowering thing you can do is understand that there is that step in between that is your thoughts and your interpretation and the story that your brain makes up about your circumstances that creates all of that emotion within you. And as soon as you understand that and that you can turn that around, then you are really holding the world in the palm of your hand.
Right, is actually thinking about what you're doing. I think most people go around, they say significant number of us go around living our lives very unconsciously or subconsciously. So we're not able
Exactly.
to intentionally shift ourselves in ways that are more productive. Thank you so much. This is so good. Sharon, tell us a little bit about your program and how people can reach out to you if they're interested in getting some coaching from you.
Yeah, so my program is called Exhausted to Extraordinary, and it's where I help you get through that mental fog and find the ability to shift your thoughts quickly and to regain the joy in your work in 15 minutes a day. We do
Oh,
that in 90 days. So, really take you from soup to nuts, help you learn everything that's essentially in the book, but coaching you through it 1 week at a time. And that's been tremendously successful and just such a joy for me to lead people through that. So if you're interested in learning more, you can look me up on my website, drsharongrossman.com. And then for those of you who are kind of just wondering, am I burned out? Is what I'm feeling related to burnout? What do I do? I've got this really nice little checklist that you can download and find out for yourself. And that's available again on my website at drsharongrossman.com/burnout checklist. And on my website, there is a contact form. If you have any questions, if you want to reach out to me, you can also find me on LinkedIn. And there's also a way for you to book a chat. So everything is right there on the website. And thanks for having me, Elsie. And I hope that people do reach out and feel free to ask any questions about this because I'm always
yes, even if it's for yourself or somebody that you know,
exactly.
everybody knows somebody. I mean, we know 50% of physicians are burned out. So thank you so much for this. Thank you everybody for watching. My name is Dr. Elsie Coe. If you have a topic in physician leadership that you want to share, that I would be grateful to have you on my podcast. So reach out to me at info@drelsieco.com. If you're looking for leadership coaching and mentorship, go to leadphysician.org and sign up there. Any last words of wisdom you want to share, Sharon, for people out there who have this in the forefront of their mind?
Well, I think as you just mentioned, a lot of times we don't recognize burnout in ourselves, but other people recognize it in us. And one of the best things, especially we just had Valentine's Day, and I'm always thinking about how we can help spread the word about burnout and help people who are struggling figure this out and help them find resources. And so I've actually created a program for people who purchase the book for others. I really want to encourage people and incentivize them to do that and help them to help others. And so if you go to 7esolution.com, that is the website for my book, you will see everything that you can get, which is basically free coaching videos for me on a monthly basis, just as a thank you for gifting the book to someone else. And that is my way of encouraging us to all share this message and some resources with the people who need it the most.
Gee, thank you so much, Sharon, for that. I'm sure you're helping so many people. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Until next Sunday, come watch us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook.